Hello, everyone. It's time to get started. I'm struggling with how to upload slides for the interim, and am now getting help by Jabber from Robert. But the agenda is available in text form. People can see that if you click on the meeting materials. So I'd like to go through that. Okay, finally success. So sorry for the wasted few minutes there. We have a pretty full agenda, but we need to start, as always, with the note well. Please, if you're going to contribute, make sure you understand your responsibilities under the note well. This is the agenda, and it's not the agenda. How did that happen? I'll fix that in a minute. This is the agenda. So apparently the first half of the agenda from IETF-113 was on that slide, but this is today's agenda. And so the slides for all of these are posted under IETF-113. I will copy them over now, but Sean, if you can, I think you're the one who's going to talk, is that right? Is Sean here? We do not have Sean. Okay, is somebody else going to talk about the KEM certificates? Okay. Ludwig, you want to start? I'll get your slides up in just a moment.
So it's Julien Pratt which is going to give the talk.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, so should I start or?
Yeah, I'm uploading the slides.
Okay.
Hopefully you're seeing slides.
Yes,
Great.
it's fine. Thank
Okay.
you very much. Thanks.
And I will
So,
upload the other decks now as well. So while you're talking.
okay. Okay, so hello everybody. So I'm pretty new to this group. So first, let me introduce myself. I'm Julien Prat from CryptoNext Security. And so we, with Ludovic Perret from CryptoNext and Mike Unsworth, we wrote this draft RFC to propose a solution to use the post-quantum chem in the CMS. Yes, if you can switch to next slide, please. So yes, it's the summary of the presentation. So maybe we can switch to next slide. So yes, as I said, the purpose of this RFC is to present a solution to allow the use of a key encapsulation mechanism within the cryptographic message syntax. The issue here relies on the specification of the key encapsulation mechanism because according to the NIST specification and especially according to the standardization process currently ongoing at NIST level, a key encapsulation mechanism generates a session key randomly, which is an issue in the CMS context because the general use case for CMS encryption is to randomly generate a SEC, content encryption key, and then to encrypt this key with an asymmetric algorithm. And this SEC is used to encrypt the data to be protected. So here the issue is that the current chem don't allow this kind of things. So we will try to propose a scheme to allow this. I mean to transmit a content encryption key which has a fixed value. So then for this scheme, we've tried to set some requirements. So here I mentioned the two main requirements. The first one is that the key transport mechanism should be secure against quantum computers. And then that's what I said, the key transport mechanism should be able to take the content encryption key as input. So that's the reason why we defined this chem-trans mechanism, which is basically an adaptation of the already existing RSA chem coming from the RFC, if I remember, well, 5652. So next slide, please. So yes, just as a reminder, here we remind what a key encapsulation mechanism is. So it's a cryptographic algorithm allowing secret sharing, and it consists of three functions: a key generation mechanism, an encapsulation function, and a decapsulation function. And as I said previously, the problem comes from the encapsulation function, which outputs random shared secret. And then it's impossible to encrypt a fixed content encryption key with a chem as defined here. So next slide, please. Thank you. The whole mechanism will actually be a combination of three algorithms. So first a chem, a key encapsulation mechanism, then a KDF. So here we remind what exactly is a KDF. So it consists of only one function taking as input a data and a size, and outputting new data of the size defined as input. And the next algorithm that we will need is the wrap algorithm, which is defined on the next slide. Here, thank you. So yes, the wrapping algorithm, it's basically a symmetric cryptographic algorithm protecting data in confidentiality and in integrity. And it will consist of two functions, wrap functions and non-wrap functions, making the invert operation. So next slide, please. So the whole mechanism is defined in this slide. So it's what we named the chem trans mechanism, so which is the combination of the three previous algorithms that we just saw. So the mechanism is here. So it's really an adaptation, a generalization of the RSA chem algorithm. And thanks to this mechanism, we will allow the transport of the keying data, any keying data actually, so including the CMS content encryption key. And we will be able to make this mechanism quantum safe by using actually a chem algorithm, a quantum safe chem algorithm. So this will make using a chem quantum safe algorithm will make the whole mechanism chemtrans quantum safe. So that's it for the description of the mechanism. And next slide, please. Thank you. So after defining the cryptographic mechanism, then some fields in the CMS have to be clarified regarding this new mechanism, especially so the recipient info type in CMS must be set to quick trans recipient info. And the following values have to be set. I mean, the algorithm must be IDChem trans OID. So it's a new, an introduction of a new OID for the chemtrans mechanism. And then the different sub-algorithm will be defined thanks to a value of type generic hybrid parameters. And then next convention is about the certificate convention. And so in the certificate, we will make mandatory the key usage extension that should be set to key encipherment. And also the subject public info, of course, should be should match with the OID of the chem, so that will be quantum safe or even a regular classical chem. So that's it for the for what the RFC introduces. And then there are still open points to be discussed regarding this new mechanism. So there are those points are on the next slide. Thank you. So there are still some open points to be discussed, but there are mainly minor points. So the first point is maybe the way to communicate info about the key trans mechanism which is used. So it can be used as we propose in this RFC, thanks to the key trans recipient info, as it is done currently in the RFC chem. But it could be also done by introducing a new top-level recipient info called chem recipient info, for instance. Or as well, we could use the existing other recipient info and define an instance of this other recipient info as a chem recipient info. And then the other open points are about the certificate conventions. So maybe that will be discussed in the Shen RFC, maybe. And the other points are, so obviously the new IDs to be defined. So we have two types of OID that should be defined: the OID of the chem transport mechanism, and also, of course, the chem algorithm, the new quantum safe chem algorithms. And then the last point is about the algorithm limitations. So as I said, all the three sub-algorithms, chem, KDF, and wrap, can be chosen. So do we want to limit the algorithm to the quantum safe, for instance, chem, or do we want to enhance the possibilities to also support legacy algorithms? So maybe it's what we can discuss here. And so if you have some view on that, we will be pleased to discuss this. So maybe that's it for this presentation.
Before I open the queue, because I was struggling with the slides, I failed to recruit a note taker. Do I have a volunteer who can do that in the tool before the discussion of these slides begins? Somebody do that for us, please. Tim, are you in a spot where you could do that?
Not easily.
Something strange really just happened. I don't know what's going on. My guess is that Vitico is trying to help us with the chat room, and something was just reset.
Russ, this is Jonathan. I can log into HedgeDoc to take notes.
Thank you very much. That would be a huge help. Okay, let me put slides back up. And I think the one that people will most likely have questions about. Thank you very much, Jonathan. And Mike, you have a question.
Audio test? Audio test? Can you hear me?
We can
Yes,
hear
we
you,
can.
but not well. It sounds you're very distant.
Perfect. Okay.
There we go.
I put my hand up when you asked if someone wanted to talk about Sean's draft.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't see it at all. We'll
good.
We'll just swap the order. Then I'll have you up next.
Sure. Yeah, I don't have any comment about this one. I think the chem stuff is pretty good and straightforward. Well done.
Okay. Yuri.
All right. I completely agree regarding chem. I see it as an extra overhead using wrap. In fact, it is trivially simple to extend chem into something that sends a pre-generated key. I'm not sure what's the best way for me to explain how and whether this is the right time and place to do so. But it would require, instead of a whole key wrap, one XOR operation on the sender side and one XOR operation on the receiver side. And
So
sending
can
over
you,
the wire. Yes,
can you sketch that for us? I mean, you're saying
I
send
can. I'm
the
not
arbitrary.
Yes. Yes. I certainly can. I'm just not sure how to best do it here with the tools available. Basically, over the wire, it's another bit or byte string of the size of the either shared secret or desired target shared key. And operation-wise, XOR on each side. And of course, the sending side would have to generate the key itself that it wants to share. Would you like me to post it later to the mailing list, or struggle in attempt to maybe present it here?
If you can quickly put together a slide during the next talk, I can post it and we can come back to this topic.
Understood. Thank you.
Email it to me. Mike?
Got it.
So if I think what he's going to present, I think what Yuri's going to present is basically an XOR wrap, but you still need to choose a KDF? Question mark. The thing to be careful of here is we do not have a guarantee that chems produce a whitened shared secret, i.e. like RSA chem may have group theoretic structure, or the first bit may be static or something like that. So you can't, I think, in general, directly XOR a chem key. But if you kept the choice of KDF and then you XORed the derived key, that's probably okay. But yeah, let's see that sketched out so we can bash it.
Go ahead, Yuri.
One question. When we say KDF, if a standardized post-quantum chem would include a a real KDF. Can we here say that our choice of KDF is what's in the specific CAM, or does it always have to be outside of CAM, regardless of what that CAM is doing?
I mean, yeah,
Um,
that is the question, right? You used the word if in your sentence, so I guess we need to get to the bottom of that if.
Saying is,
In
RSA,
other words, we could
yeah.
assign an org that said KEM foo with KDF bar.
Well, I think for the post-quantum ones, it probably is true that they're whitened. At least starting with round 2 or round 3, they all include like a shake as their last internal step. So I think anything coming out of NIST will have the property we want. I just think we want to be careful that in general, like chem, like if you make an elliptic curve based chem, it might not have the same property.
Yes,
And
exactly.
maybe that's fine.
What I want to see here is the ability to specify that CAM is the one done implicitly by the that KDF is done implicitly by the specific CAM. So I specify CAM OID ABC and the KDF OID DEF. And that OID means explicit KDF is null operation. Output of CAM is KDF. Or I specify KDF XYZ, which implies that for whatever reason, I'm not happy with how CAM whitened its output. And I'm applying external, explicit KDF to it.
Yes, basically that's the case because some of the current CAMs output, for instance, 256 bits shared secret, while others output 5012 bits. So maybe we have to it's mandatory to have a KDF afterwards to align the size and to make it independent of the symmetric algorithm that will be then used for encryption. I mean, as such, we can't assume on the shared secret size that will be sent by the CAM algorithm.
Okay, Quinn? Quinn, can you hear us? We cannot hear you. You need to push the microphone at the top left of your screen to unmute yourself. There you go.
Sorry, I did not click on the icon on the left corner. So I would like to add more information to the discussion. So currently, the CAMs we have, they will come out with a shared secret of 256 bit. Likely that is going to be. So whenever you run the encapsulation, then you would have 256 bits of shared secrets. And if technically, if you want to use that as a key for AES 256, then you can use that to encrypt the data that you want. And then you need to send along the ciphertext along with your encrypted data. That would be enough for the recipient to decrypt it. recipient must have the private key, and that private key with the ciphertext would be enough for them for the recipient to generate the share secret, and that share secret is a key which will use to encrypt data, and it would be enough to decrypt data. In case if you use AES-128 to encrypt your data, then you can do the truncation. You take 128 bits of the output, but knowing that by doing that you basically you won't have more than 128 bits of security from your whole scheme. So it's different from the code in RSA transport that we have. So very likely the standard going to be the share secret to be 256 bits for a CAM.
Mike?
Clarifying question, Quinn. So I know the earliest version of Psych, the J invariant, was not didn't have the avalanche property. So is it now safe to assume for all chems that you can use it directly as a symmetric key? Is that a guarantee that you're building into the competition?
At this moment, I don't remember all the details about Psych in my head, but for the finalists, Lattice finalists, 3 of them, they all have 256 bits of share secret.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah. So I think Psych is the same for the CAM, but I just don't remember exact sure about details. But the CAM for Psych is going to be the same. It's around it's going to be 256 bits, I think. Because for all the chems, basically at the end step, you do the hash to generate the share secret, and the hash is to be 256 bits or 512. It depends on the hash you use. So that's why you have a fixed output length share secret for a CAM, because you do the hash at the last step to produce a share secret. So yeah, so we can do we can do a wrap, to be to have the same logic that we've been using with RSA. But if we don't want that, you can use the key straightly, because every time you run a CAM, the encapsulation, you have a fresh new share secret, even though
Yes.
yeah.
Yes. Excuse me, but I think an issue in CMS is that if we want to send a message to several receivers, usually the encryption key will be the same for all the receivers, but we have to encrypt them individually to each recipient. So meaning that we have to be able to communicate a fixed key. That's why this key, in my opinion, the CAM cannot be used as such, because the CAM generates, as you said, a unique shared secret. But then, we cannot reuse it, for instance, to encrypt the data to several users. That's the problem, I think.
Let me try to recap. You would like to send to multiple recipients with unique key for each recipient. That what you're trying to do?
Yes, exactly.
No, I don't think that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to send the content encryption key to all of the recipients.
Yes, yes, you're right. That's what.
And if with that is the same functionality with using the key straightly. So even in the case if you would like to generate unique key for each recipient, but they all generated from the same share secret, then the recipient can generate the keys belong to the other recipients, by we run the hash. because every recipient gets the shared secret. And from there, each recipient can generate the other keys belonging to the other recipients if he or she wants to.
Go ahead, Mike.
Maybe we should take this to the mailing list, like see Yuri's suggestion and then discuss whether it actually accomplishes CMS's goals. Maybe we should take that to mailing list.
Yeah, I think so too, or we won't get to the other briefings. I have not received a slide from Yuri yet, so I'm assuming he's still working on it. Yuri, go ahead.
The slide is on the way, and
Okay.
using the simple approach depicted on the slide, which, by the way, we used a couple of decades ago. Using that approach, you can use use post-quantum as MIME at the cost of additional 256 bits per each recipient. Russ, please let me know when you receive my email.
It just arrived. I now have to upload it.
All right. Of course, with post-quantum chems, sending email to, for example, 100 recipients with 100 different public keys doesn't seem all that. I'm just imagining, with the email cap usually being 20 to 25 megabytes, it's possible that the Yep.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I took it back. Yeah, I got confused. So the recipient must be only the one who got the private key. So if you do multiple recipients, then you have to run multiple encapsulations separately.
Yes.
Because you got to use separate public key for each recipient. Right. Or you really got it right. Yeah, I got confused a way around in my head.
No problem whatsoever.
Yeah. So in that case, yeah, we we can do a PDF or we just use the key straightly. But the PDF is very cheap. So, but it's, yeah. So.
Okay, Yuri, can you see your slide?
Yes, I can. And what a
Okay,
beautiful slide it is.
through it.
In a way, you can consider it a wrap, but I betcha it's a simpler wrap than what you had in mind. And from theoretic security point of view, it works. Claude Shannon would agree. And I conjecture that you do not need anything more complicated here.
Just, well, but one point, I think that this RFC only provides the framework meaning that, for instance, you can consider a KDF which will be identity and the wrap algorithm that will be XOR. So it's exactly what you are describing here.
You're also assuming the CEK and the shared secret are the same length, which could be an okay assumption, but needs to be stated.
Yes, and well, for a post-quantum chems, it is the correct assumption. And if you use RSA chem, where you can send pretty much any reasonable size of shared secret, it just doesn't make sense to send, for example, 257 bits or 254 bits when what you will need is 256. It's possible, but it is an opposite of smart.
Okay, Tim?
But yes, that assumption needs to be explicitly documented, of course.
Go ahead, Tim. You're muted. Okay. Quinn, is that an old hand?
I've been thinking a little bit. I've been thinking it's you know it's, oh, the equation disappeared.
I was ready to move to the next thing.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. It looks okay right now, but I can't say something with a sure tone, in a minute, something like that when I look at something. Yeah, I think we need to think about it over the email list and then come back to it whenever we come to it later. But it looks okay. It looks okay to me.
Okay, Tim?
I hope that the final draft and the final RFC will provide identity KDF and identity wrap. And I personally hope that it will provide this wrap as an option.
Yeah, because in this construction, practically it looks okay, but we have to think. So, for example, if the attacker can control the random CE key and try to muck it in around a little bit, try to figure out the SS, the shared secret, and something like that. We need to think about it.
Well, as I said, this is not a new idea. It has been analyzed and deployed before. So if you assume that the attacker controls your CEK or whatever key you want to use, then of course a result of your key exchange will be you arrive at the key desired by attacker. Sure.
I'm not saying there is a problem. I'm just saying I would like to think. I'm not saying that there's a problem. I say it looks okay to me, but I would like to think about something a little bit new. I'm not saying there's any problem. I'm not saying that. I said it looks okay to me, but I would like to think about it from different perspectives, different angles, different attack scenarios, and before I feel comfortable about it. I'm not saying there is problem. I'm saying it looks okay, but I would like to think about all possibilities that I could think of before I make myself feel happy about it.
I like the expression all the possibilities. Please feel free to get back to me when you have thought about all the possibilities. I'd
Or
love
that
to
means
hear.
Okay. All right.
no.
We have a person in the queue who's been waiting a while. Tim, go ahead.
Yeah. So I actually agree with Yuri. This is actually perfectly fine in a perfect world. The problem is when people start like making small modifications to these profiles, or they combine it with another poorly defined protocol. This is the sort of thing that causes us to get into trouble from time to time. So I think it might be prudent to use something a little bit stronger than an XOR, especially because there are things that are a little bit stronger than XOR that are pretty darn cheap. So I would be a little hesitant of just using a bare XOR here, even though it is, from an information theoretical point of view, you're right, it's perfectly fine.
Okay, Yuri, I'm going to close the queue after Mike, and then we're going to move to the next briefing.
I want to emphasize that from a cryptographic point of view, it doesn't make a difference what kind of wrap you use. If your chem is fine and your CEK is fine, then whatever secure wrap you use will end up okay. If either your CEK or your chem are vulnerable, then regardless of what kind of wrap you use, the attacker ends up in control, especially if in the end you do want to arrive at the same CEK. So by doing something a little bit more expensive and more complex will not buy you anything here from security point of view. Spoken as a cryptographer. Dixie.
I closed the queue, Julian.
Okay,
So,
sorry.
Mike?
Put a word on, I think, what Quinn and Tim are getting at. It's protocol composition attacks. What if you use the same shared secret public key here and in some arbitrary other protocol? I think is the analysis we need to do there.
Yes, exactly. Okay, we're going to go on to the first presentation, which Mike said he could do for Sean. And it's this one here. Okay, Mike.
On slides very well. Here, next.
There's only 5 of them, and one of them's the title.
No, yeah, go. Let's see what's in here. Yeah, so this draft is basically very simple. He's just creating a placeholder draft to define CMS OIDs, PKIX OIDs for the NIST, whatever chems come out of the NIST candidates. So the draft right now is full of, algorithms covered are candidate TBD1. The encoding for the public key and private key are also provided. So it's just a placeholder draft to stick OIDs, public key and private key encodings. And then the open question, he's got open questions. Defining OIDs, doing definitive parameters, doing define key usages. And I think Sean has made some opinionated decisions on a couple of these points. Like key usages in particular, I think Sean's made some opinionated decisions. Yeah, as is put on that. Yes, if you sort of go back one slide. Go back one. Yeah, so there's his, do we prohibit key usages? Data prohibit signing keys. If we pick key encipherment, then should we probably say must not key agree, encipher only, decipher only? So we have some choices to make there. But otherwise, this draft is pretty much just a placeholder. So we have a draft in the pipe where we can stuff voids for the NIST algorithms as they come online. I think that's more or less all there is here.
So, Yuri, go ahead.
I personally am uncomfortable with the NIST's choice on key encapsulation only, and considering that there were candidates that provided a Diffie-Hellman-like exchange, like SIDE, which evolved into psych, I would prefer not to kill key agreement in hope that maybe at a later stage of NIST competition, NIST would wisen up and accept something like SIDE, perhaps for ephemeral only use.
So Yuri, I don't disagree with you, except to say that the charter says any algorithm we pick must be vetted by some process, such as NIST or CFRG. And so what this draft is saying is for the NIST approved algorithms, we're going to use them as key transport, not as key agreement.
I haven't lost the hope yet that NIST would finally, eventually, wisen up and standardize a Diffie-Hellman-like exchange.
But it would be a different algorithm is the point.
Yes, but it would probably, if it would probably come as an output of this post-quantum competition. It would come from this same effort, just not at the end of the round 3.
Tom?
I'm sorry. An idea just came up to my head regarding to Ori's construction. I think there is security that declaration for that construction. Very very simple. You lose in about half. So for the CE key, key, the encryption key, and the ciphertext, the shared secret. When you do XOR, in this security, you need two things to be secure. You need the encryption key to be secure, and for the encapsulation, the shared secret need to be secure. So when you do XOR 2 bits together, and you reveal the results, that means you're losing half of the security from either one of the two. So for example, I look at the result number 1, bit 1. Then I know either one of the two XOR got to be a 0 and a 1. So if I guess the bit for the shared secret wrong, then the other one got to be correct. So either one of the two losing value, losing the security. So, and that's how you losing half of this bit of security from the construction. So you cannot use the XOR. You have to do encryption.
I disagree, and the security.
Okay, we're not going to debate this now. Let's take this to the mail list, please.
All right.
Okay, Tom, you had a question about this briefing? Okay, he left the queue. So, all right. Any questions? I think that we should wait to adopt this when there's actually some meat in it, because we expect NIST to announce some things very quickly. But I have no problem with this being the place that we put them and then adopt it. Okay. So, Mike, I think you're going to talk about the hybrid composite next.
Wonderful. Yeah, I'll try and keep this fairly short. So let's fly through what's new with the composite draft since I last presented. Go ahead, next. So I sort of got a couple categories here. So this just the submission status of the drafts. We haven't really done much, but we have a bunch of changes that we've been working on with our authors group. So I'll tell you what changes are coming with Composite Keys 02. I'll tell you what changes are coming with Composite Chems 00, which we haven't published yet. And then finally, let's talk about terminology and whether the word hybrid is problematic. Next. So this is the current state of published drafts. Composite Keys 01, explicit Composite Keys 01. So that's the completely generic stuff in any OIDs you want at runtime version versus the define OIDs for explicit pairs version. Composite SIGs 06, that's the one that has been in the queue the longest. And then Composite Encryption 01, we did a sort of is much newer. Figured we should cover content encryption also. So these are the currently published drafts. What we've got in the cooker, if you go to the next slide, we've got a Keys 02. The major difference being that we've rolled in, well, I'll get to the major difference in the next slide, but we've basically rolled explicit and generic together into one draft. And there's a few other changes thanks to our co-authors at dtrust. Composite SIGs, I don't think we have immediate plans to do another revision of that, although we do need to do some minor work to sync it up, especially once we roll in explicit. We'll need to do some minor work. And the K of N mode we'll need to cover also. So we will need to do some work to SIGs. And then we're going to drop encryption and we're going to rename it as Composite Chem. And I'll get to that in a few slides. Next. So keys changes from 01 to 02. We tried to keep this backwards compatible. I know there are some vendors, Entrust included, who are starting to have commercial offerings that include composite. And so we've tried to keep it backwards compatible, that keys produced under the 01 draft will still parse with the same semantics under the 02 draft. Working copies in GitHub, I put the link below. Feedback is absolutely welcome. So here's the big changes. So we've merged, dtrust had an intelligent composed algorithm draft from, what was it, May 2021? So it's been out for a year. It's almost identical. Like I think our draft and dtrust draft would almost be binary wire compatible. They're so close. And so the fact that two groups not aware of each other's work came up with the identical solution, I think is good news that we're on the right track here. So we've included dtrust in the authors group and we've merged their ICA into our IETF draft. We've merged generic and explicit, so they now share a wire encoding. And I've got a slide later on showing what that wire encoding looks like. We have tightened up the combiner modes. So and or, we've added any, we've added K of N, and we've added custom. One of the goals here is to differentiate. I think or mode meant, when we said or, it meant different things to different people. And we probably still have some work to do to clean that up. So when you say or for a signature, does that mean the signer is allowed to only produce one signature? Does it mean the signer has to use all their keys, but the verifier is allowed to only verify one signature? Does it mean the verifier has to verify them all, but as long as one passes, you're good? So I think the semantics of or is still not totally clear. And when I hear presentations, different people seem to refer to it in different ways. So we defined any to try and differentiate, any and custom to try and add more differentiation, but I think we probably haven't quite got to the bottom of that. And we've also added the K of N mode, which is out of dtrust intelligent composed algorithms draft. So K of N would say, here's 5 keys, you're allowed to use 3 of them. And we would specify that in the public key. Next. So, wire encodings. In So now the wire encodings that are shared by explicit and generic, or will be in the upcoming draft, in both cases, they are a sequence size 2 to max of subject public key info for the public key. The private key is a sequence 2 to max of one asymmetric key. In the generic case, the top level algorithm identifier is ID composite key, which we're just going to define. And then the component algorithms can be anything at runtime. The difference with explicit is that with an explicit composite, the top level algorithm identifier is defined by the algorithm. So you would have a draft that says this is, RSA with Sphinx. And then the component algorithms must use the algorithms defined by the explicit algorithm. Hopefully that's clear. And then I have the wire encoding on the next slide. So here's, it's a bit squinty in Meet Echo, but here's what this looks like on the wire. So your generic case, the top algorithm identifier is your ID composite key. Params, we're currently using params to carry the combiner mode. So I've done it's mode ID composite OR. And then the composite public key is a sequence of subject public key info. So then you just stick in your normal EC public key and you stick in your normal RSA public key. And there you go. Explicit is identical. The only difference being that the top level OID is now an explicit OID, and it's the client's job to check that the inner keys match what's expected. Okay, next. So a little more detail on the combiner modes. We've chosen to specify them through an algorithm parameter. I know we've tried so hard to stay away from parameters on the top level OID, but the K of N mode needs to carry a K. You need to carry that integer. And so we need somewhere to put that. And so that forced us back down the path of needing a top level algorithm ID parameter. So here's our current proposal is AND is implicit via an absent parameter. So if you leave the parameter absent, it's assumed that it's the strictest AND mode. And then we've defined OIDs for or any K of N carries an integer, which is K. So N is implicit, that's the number of keys, and then you specify you're allowed to use some subset K of them. You specify what K is. And then custom mode basically says if you want to do something that's not this, feel free, but get off our OIDs. Do you want to speak now, Russ, or do you want to wait to the end?
That's the questions on this slide.
Sure.
How custom different than replacing the top level OID?
So I'm imagining that would be a like proprietary policy. Like you might say policy dictated by NSS, for example, might be a.
Okay, but from a interoperability point of view, if you encounter the top OID as composite and then you encounter this custom OID, you don't know what to do. So finding
Fair.
out incompatible at the top level seems like you'd be able to bail out earlier.
And it probably is the same result. You encounter an OID with a parameter you don't recognize.
Right.
Yep.
Just food for thought.
Good.
Mike?
Nom nom.
It's a thought question, maybe. This is good work. This puts the policy in the parameters with the key, which is which means that the key belongs to the signer, presumably, which seems odd because I think it would be the recipient who would want to assert a policy, right? If this is done for authentication, the recipient cares how many algorithms are being used, not the signer. But if this policy says this is how the signature was done, then obviously the recipient needs to know that. But if it's the recipient who gets to decide what it cares about in terms of how many signatures are applied, this doesn't help.
Yeah, that's a fair question. Does the signer, or in fact the CA issuing the signer's key, have a right to specify this policy? That's a fair debate question. The real motivator for putting this in the public key, though, is this CMS encryption use cases. You go fish someone's encryption cert out of a directory, and you need to know, are you allowed to send a top secret payload with only using one of their public keys? And so it's really the CMS encryption case that drives putting this policy in the public key.
Fair enough. Cool. Thanks.
But I agree it's a bit weird for signatures. Open to debate.
Go ahead, Panos.
I wanted to echo Michael's suggestion that, that maybe it's mostly on signatures, this comment that I'm going to make, but I think adding this logic here, this logic that we have not done before, or K of N, adds a lot of complexity, and we shouldn't do it. I think this should be up to the verifier to decide if he sees two algorithms and he only wants to do one, may the power be with him, but it should not be part of the public key or the signature, in my opinion.
So we debated quite a bit. I mean, we've gone back and forth whether the implicit by absent should be an and or an or a do whatever you want. Panos, would you mind starting a mail list discussion? That's probably the right place to discuss this. I'm happy to change the draft however the community wants. Panos, are you willing to start that thread for me?
Yeah, I could start a thread, yeah. I think, the draft is good. The composites are a good idea because we may not trust some algorithms for some time, but I think adding this logic, complicates it a lot unnecessarily. So yeah, I can start a thread.
So I think that suggestion then also solves a second debate, which is what do we mean by or? And or probably then has to mean the signer must use all their keys in order for that sort of the verifier can choose what they want to work. The signer doesn't get to do a subset.
Yeah. I think there's a little complexity there that, we may be missing if we add this. So yeah.
And the counter use case, I think, is Max Pala's use case, where he wants to be issuing devices that may or may not know how to use all their keys yet. Like he may want to issue certs to devices that haven't been patched yet.
Yeah.
But maybe that needs to get off the or. Maybe that's not an or. Maybe that's an any. Okay, yeah. Let's discuss on mail list. Good questions.
Go ahead, Yuri.
Since signature verification is completely in hands of the verifier, and what to do with the signature is also a verifier's business, I agree with those before me who said it's not the signer's job to dictate the policy. Your policy to sign is X, my policy to act upon validation is Y. They do not need to match.
As long as the signer has provided enough data for you to be able to do your policy.
Yes.
I guess not. Otherwise, you just reject it. Okay. Yeah. Let's discuss on the mail list. I think these are good changes, but let's see them written out, and then I can incorporate them.
Go ahead, Ito-san.
In addition to that, those verifiers, policy things, even for the CMS things, policy may change over time, right? Sometimes some algorithm can become weaker. So, I'm not quite sure about to embed those K of N or any or things into the at the time of the signing process, or before signing procedure. So those policy may change after signing, and yeah, maybe better to, how to say, have some mechanism to change policy after the signing, at least. I feel like it might be on the time of the verification, but yeah, that's my comment here.
Perfect. Yeah, let's take this. So I think there's sort of a few directions. We've debated this a lot. We've suggested a direction here. Other directions are we change what the default is, what's implied by absent, to one of the other ones. Another option is this doesn't belong in the public key at all. Maybe these modes obviously belong on a signature algorithm to state what you did. We also need to think about the encryption case. How do you convey to an encryptor that you only want to receive data under a certain mode? Don't send me data using only my RSA key. Yeah, these are really good suggestions. Let's take this to the list. And Yuri?
No way you can enforce what the sender sends you. You may choose to process it or not based on the metadata or whatever.
Sure. You could suggest, but yeah, you can't enforce, obviously. Jan?
A protocol should be enforceable, testable and enforceable.
Jan?
I mean, since the discussion on this K of N mode continues here, I just want to say the words to this. As a designer, or the issue of public key or signature, I want to make sure under which conditions my signature is valid. And I think this is important information that needs that is needed by a verifier. And that's why we need to put it here. Just by future, but and continue this on the waiting list. Okay.
The next two slides are actually yours, Jan, if you want to explain the K of N mode.
Okay.
Russ, next.
Okay, I mean, as some guests already, we explained already this, I think, not sure if this adds any more information. We have a certain number of keys, N, and a certain number of keys used, which is defined by the K. So we can talk about how this will be used, but from my opinion, I think let's go to the next slide. For example, for signatures in PKIs. Russ, can you go to the next slide? Thanks. So this K of N mode is the only way to make an agile PKI. So I sketched the use case here. So we have like 3 algorithms. One is the classical one, 2 are PQC algorithms, and now we issue a certificate with all 3 algorithms. And then at some later point, we realize there's an attack on one of the algorithms that makes them unusable, so renders them broken. So with the K of N mode, we can combine the flexibility of an AND mode with the security of an OR mode. So we still have like 2 signatures that needs to be verified in order that the signature is valid. But if one of the 3 signatures is broken, because it's quite we see with the PQC algorithms to this uncertain future, we still have some some way to verify our signatures with or the same security level as before. So I think this is our point at T-Trust, how this should be handled to make an PKI agile and lasting. Okay, thanks.
Yuri?
What if the recipient does not care about one of the signatures specified? Either doesn't trust or doesn't want it.
But I mean, that's the same. That's the same issue with any signature. I mean, if he receives your certificate and doesn't care about the signature, so what's the case to it? I mean, that's not the point in signatures, right? In signatures, you want. I mean, the receiver wants to trust. It's exactly his intentions that he really wants to make sure that this certificate is valid, and it's the signer or the issuer that needs to make the effort to ensure that the recipient can do it. I think that's it's another thinking. It's another. I think it's a. Okay, I can tell it. So with encryption, it's another way around. That's my point.
I'm trying to understand the logic. You specify k of n, 2 of 3.
Yes.
One of the 3 appears broken, but one of the remaining 2 I do not care about and do not trust. What should I do?
Why should you not trust them? I mean, that is the first point. I mean, we cannot trust the third one because it's broken.
For the sake of the arguments and using the slide presented, Falcon, for the sake of the argument, is broken. ECDSA, I do not trust. By the logic of your draft, do I accept the signature because XMSS verifies and I accept it, or do I fail it because out of the 2 provided, only one is good for me?
I mean, who defines which algorithm is trusted or not? I mean, usually a receiver relies also with this decision on some other catalogs, for example. And if this catalog says ECDSA is valid and XMSS is valid, why he should not trust them?
I think that problem already exists today. I can send you an SMIME email signed with RSA 512, and the signature is valid, but you can choose not to accept it.
Yes,
Okay,
absolutely.
Scott?
And in that case, it would be my choice to either accept the signature and trust the document, or say the signature is not valid for other reasons. So do you want me to make the same choice here? I'm okay with that. I just wanted to be explicit.
Yeah, I think that's outside the scope of this document, whether if you don't trust the algorithms that the signer has chosen, that's...
Okay, Scott?
Follow up some of I don't quite understand the logic behind, at least in the signature method. Suppose that we have a composite signature with say Rainbow and Falcon, and then we later decided that we read this paper that Falcon Rainbow is not trustable. This allows us not to trust it, but the verifier basically still, if the Falcon signature is still there and we trust it, then why don't we trust it? I don't see the point of being able to omit the Falcon signature because, the Rainbow signature, because we don't trust it anymore.
Understood. Yes.
That seems to be more of a practical matter than something of a security issue.
I think deprecating algorithms has always been hard.
Definitely, and this is usually also now not done in PKI structures, so that's not I think the scope of this group, most probably. But there are ways that something is deprecated, for example, in national catalogs for algorithms. At least in Germany, this is of course done. And
Sebastian?
Yeah, I have a question. So we have 3 signatures here, and you talked about PKI. Does this approach also defines how to put these 3 signatures into a certificate?
I think this could be done with a draft, the signature draft we put in place, right, Mike?
Correct. Yeah, we're just talking about public keys.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's different modules here, and if I'm interested how to put different signatures, I could have a look into the other draft and get it from there.
That is the idea, yes.
Go ahead, Florence.
I suppose my kind of short statement is I think this adds an awful lot of complexity and therefore risk of like implementation and logic errors. I think it's particularly hard to follow when it's because of kind of what we were talking about earlier, because this is tied to the key rather than to the signature or the certificate or the chem. So it's a little bit hard to kind of understand what the security flaws are. I suppose I think the example was given here of if an algorithm was found to be broken, then you could not reissue certificates. And so like you could just use the other 2 algorithms. And I suppose in that case, I think it would be easier to update the certificates than to update both the server and the client to say that a particular algorithm is broken. So I think I'd need more convincing that this is worth the extra complexity and risk.
Okay, so maybe we should. I think maybe moving this to the signature document would be also okay. Let's discuss this maybe on the mailing list.
And it's and it. Yelf?
So I agree about the complexity, and besides, we always only need one good signature with a good algorithm. So if we send 3 signatures because we're not so sure about the algorithms, then it should be a local policy that I have to verify, say, 2 of them or all 3, rather than just one. It just seems weird to me that the signer is going to dictate to the receiver that they should verify 2 of the 3, or to any 2 of the 3. In this, the motivation for all this is the post-quantum algorithms, which are new. Even this K of n doesn't offer you a way of saying at least one classic and at least one post-quantum. So I don't think it's very useful. It should be left to local policy.
Maybe I want to add that it's not only because of the PQC algorithms. We also had experience before where we needed to how to say it, switch whole PKIs because one key was bad or something like this. And I think this is a way to avoid exactly these hassles we had there.
Right.
But maybe we need to explain it a bit more.
I agree, but we've never went and defined such a thing before. It only came up now.
Okay.
So I think if I'm going to continue the presentation, the summary here, let's do it on the list so it's available to more than the 32 people in this meeting. But it sounds like for signatures, it doesn't make any sense. And for encryption, use cases, there's not really a strong need. And so it really shouldn't be in the public key, seems to be the consensus here. So let's take that to the list and we can update accordingly.
Did you disagree with that synopsis? Go ahead. We can't hear you.
Sorry, yeah. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, so I guess I've been hearing a lot of the argument that the relying party is the one that really cares that really decides ultimately whether they trust the signature. And obviously, I think that's true. But I think there's a counter argument maybe for the non-repudiation aspect of signatures, right? Where I guess if I hold a key pair, then I want to make sure that when somebody thinks I've signed something, I really have, and I don't want, things that are not my signature to be taken to be my signature. And so I guess I'm thinking that the CA maybe when it puts a public key in a certificate wants to be clear whether it's the combination of the keys that need to be used or not. I just wanted to kind of put that out there and see, well, I guess
So
what the reaction.
to accomplish that, does it need to be in the public key or can you attach it to the signature to achieve that?
And I guess that's the CA. I don't think you get to control which. Well, I guess you can pick the algorithm. Yeah. It's possible. Yeah. So I guess maybe you say you have a key pair that is the combination of algorithms, and then you say, and this is a ECDSA with Sphinx key pair, and pick an OID for the signature that is a. Yeah. So maybe that still works.
Because the sort of example today is a CA could certify an RSA key and then you could go use it with some absolutely stupid padding scheme.
Yes.
CA has no control over that.
Go ahead.
Yep. So I think that makes sense.
It makes absolutely no sense to put any policy information in the signature because the signature is what we do not trust.
All right.
Yeah, that's true. But so I guess I'm thinking. So I guess I've been looking a lot at RSA PSS, the way that it has done things, and maybe it's not the right way, but there you can. So in the key, you say this is an RSA key, or you say this is an RSA PSS key, and I think that's the difference, right? That so we can imagine in the key saying this is a key for RSA Sphinx in AND mode. Right, as opposed to saying this is just a collection of keys that happens to be RSA and Sphinx, and you can pick whatever signature algorithm you want.
I want to leave time for Dr. Becker after me.
Okay, so you want the next slide?
Yeah, let's move this along. So last two topics, I have one slide each. So Composite Chems, I mentioned at the top that we have a Chems-00 that we haven't published yet. Looks like this. We're basically going to define a composite content encryption scheme, and we're going to wrap it up to look like a chem. And so then it should fit nicely into the draft that Julien presented earlier. And we're, I think, doing the obvious thing here. So we presented a encryption draft a few months ago where we had 3 different variants and there was good public discussion on that. That's good. So we've chosen one to move forward with and wrap it into a chem type shape. And this is using the NIST 856CR2 KDF combiner. We have a couple open questions. Maybe I won't burn time going over them here. I'll leave that to the reader if you want to look at the slides. But I think this is fairly straightforward and an improvement over what we presented earlier. So we'll get this polished up and posted. Next.
I do just want to comment that your point 3 is interesting. I think getting more eyes on a particular approach would be good. And if it's the same approach, we got a better chance of getting more eyes on it.
So I will say to that point, to my eyes, this is in sync with the TLS hybrid chems work. I believe it's in sync. I mean, with the differences that it's got to transport a predetermined CEK, whereas TLS just rolls into the key schedule. But I think it's as synchronized as it can be. Douglas Stabila has looked over it and didn't have any meaningful feedback for whatever that means. But yeah, I think we do need to keep these in parallel.
Yeah, I understand the communicating peers versus one sender to many recipient issue.
So finally, terminology hell. Hybrid and dual are the terms that NIST chose way back at the beginning of all this. And hybrid key exchange is sort of arguably non-ambiguous, but now that we're getting into CMS content encryption, the word hybrid is like fully colliding. And it really is super annoying. So I think, if I'm not speaking for you, Florence D has softly volunteered to try and shepherd corralling our language into a good direction.
Go ahead, Florence.
I can speak. Thanks, Mike. No, you're not speaking for me. I'm happy to shepherd this. My plan was to try and get something out in time for next ITF, and then we can have a discussion there. I don't have a particular opinion on what the right answer is. I think all the words that sort of fit are overloaded. So either we make up some new words, or you end up with some quite unwieldy sentences like post-quantum, classical, multi-key algorithm signature, or something like that, which doesn't seem great either. So if people on this call do have particular opinions, I'd be really keen to talk about your thoughts, and hopefully we can get something that everyone agrees on and go from there.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I agree that the term hybrid or dual is overloaded, but at this point they are still they are not widely used, and so I'm afraid that it's maybe too late to change the terminology. But still, yeah, I'm agree with what you said, but I'm just a bit afraid that it's too late.
I heard you say it sucks, but we're stuck with it. we'll see if the that Florence agreed to lead will come up with a better answer. Go ahead, Florence.
I think it's actually fine if we end up with, we've decided the least worst option is to use the word hybrid. But at least if we've talked about it and written it down, then hopefully we don't have to kind of keep having the conversation about if it's the wrong choice.
Okay, seeing no comments, I'm done. Thank you all.
So I'm not sure who's talking about these last two. I know we don't have slides. They just wanted to give us a heads up about a few things.
Hi, can you hear me?
Hi.
Hello. So I'm gonna just talk about both of these sort of in conjunction. So we wrote two drafts. There's an informational draft and a technical draft. And the informational draft, it formally introduces a concept that Ali discussed at the last LAMPS interim, which is basically a framework for hybrid solutions that we're sort of looking at all of this with. And so sort of breaking hybrid solutions into two categories, one composite and one what we're calling non-composite solutions. And so composite solutions, we've been talking about for a while. Non-composite solutions are sort of an alternative to composite solutions. And so the way they work is instead of changes being made within cryptographic libraries and with the format of these cryptographic structures, changes instead are being made to protocol logic. And so maintaining the structure of certificates, signatures, keys, and instead specifically sending multiple certificates, multiple signatures, and so on, keeping the format of each individual one the same. And so, of course, with the exception of things that need to be altered to accommodate the chem structure, which is going to be the case. And so what the informational draft does is it just talks about the solution space a little bit with a focus on authentication, specifically on certificates and on digital signatures. It identifies some use cases for composite versus non-composite solutions. It gives an overview of a couple issues that might arise with non-composite hybrid solutions. And then we also take a quick look at how non-composite hybrid authentication can work with IETF-V2 and TLS 1.3. And so that's the informational draft. I guess I'll pause and if there's questions about that before moving on to the technical draft.
Go ahead, Mike.
I think this work is really good, by the way. I think this is really, like you called out that it's complementary to the composite, and I think it's good to define both. I'm glad you've come along and done it. And I said, rather than speaking twice, I'll say I sent a big blob of comments on the mailing list back to you yesterday.
Yes, so we did see that, and I think should be able to get a response back pretty soon. Lots of good questions. Thank you for that. All right, well, if there's nothing about the informational draft, I can just quickly talk about the technical draft. So what this draft does is it focuses in on an issue that we sort of mentioned in the informational draft. And it introduces a mechanism by which certificates can be linked at the PKI level. And so the certificates that would be linked are the certificates that would be associated each with a distinct digital signature that would be used in non-composite hybrid authentication. And so the use case we had in mind for this draft is to link a newly issued post-quantum cert to an already issued traditional cert, where both would be used in the same protocol in the same instance for non-composite authentication. And so I guess I probably don't need to go into too many details about this draft, but if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Well, the drafts were both posted during the IETF week, so I don't even know how many people noticed that they were out there. But if nothing else, I hope this encourages people to read and post comments to the mail list.
Yeah, we would love to just get a sense of if there's any interest for this approach, and maybe try to get a better understanding of use cases for this approach versus the composite approach.
Go ahead, Yuri.
I want to express my support for this approach because I believe the protocols should be able to accommodate non-composite, and it should be a policy matter which of the submitted certs to accept and use and which not to. So once again, I support this work.
Thanks.
Go ahead, Mike.
Here, the what you're calling non-composite, or what's been previously called multi-cert, is, I mean, it's good. I think it needs to be defined, so it's great that you've defined it. In some cases, it's probably fine for the two certs to be completely decoupled, come from different CAs, blah, 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 and the client can handle that. The binding mechanism you've defined, I think, also probably has value in some cases where you'd want to assert that these two certs belong together in some sense. I imagine we don't need to hunt very far to find use cases where that's adding value. The debate that I read through on the mailing list, particularly from Ryan Sleevey, and a lot of my comments sort of focus on the same, is there's a lot of edge cases there. There's a lot of sort of sharp and pointy edge cases with the bindings. What if you bind a key exchange key to a signing key? What does that even mean? What if you bind keys issued under very different cert policies? What if you bind? It's like I think my general comments are it's probably a useful mechanism, but I think there's probably a lot would be restricted and tightened up quite a bit to remove the potential for sharp edges.
Yep, that sounds good. Definitely, we're really appreciating all of the comments we're receiving, and we're working on incorporating them into a new version of the draft.
Go ahead, Yuri.
As I said, I absolutely support non-composite. I am not sure how much value does binding add, because one of the advantages of non-composite is that I can treat the certificates either together or not, depending on my policy. And I do not need to know that they are bound by some explicit mechanism. I haven't thought a lot about it, but offhand, I would question.
I agree. This draft is definitely not intended to be required to perform non-composite authentication. It's just intended to give an option for that additional sort of assertion that the certificates are linked. And so I think the intention is that this would be a matter of policy whether or not to use this mechanism, but definitely it's not intended to be required to perform non-composite authentication.
Go ahead, Yo.
So I think the sharp edges that Mike mentioned, we're bound to get them. They're always there. And the real question is whether we want to handle them in the PKI part or in the protocols, as in TLS or IKE. That's a good question, but I'm tending towards the IKE and TLS, which points me to non-composite, but I think that's really worth a lot of discussion.
Definitely. And based on some earlier discussions we've had, there seems to be maybe a benefit in different use cases to doing this type of decision-making in a protocol versus in a different area. And so I think IKE v2, for example, it seems like a very good place to bump this to the protocol. And so there is another draft actually in the IPsec-ME working group, which discusses how to do non-composite hybrid authentication in IKE v2, if anyone is interested in looking. It doesn't explicitly use this binding mechanism, but there's nothing that precludes the binding mechanism from being incorporated.
Go ahead, Ito-san.
Yeah, I have one question. Is it like for non-composite one, like for example, is it how to say the cross protocol approach? Well, it's only for single non-composite use for single protocol, right? We are not assuming you are not assuming to use same key for seven different protocol, but this discussion is, for example, use two certificate for single protocol. So not discussing about cross protocol things, and that is outside the scope of this document. I'm understanding that, and I think that is how to say good way to do that, because as Ryan Slippy was saying, there is some discussion about cross protocol attack or whatever, but those cross protocol I feel like it is better to be at the outside of the scope about the cross protocol attack things. So yeah. Did you get my thing? I'm not quite sure.
Can you say what you mean by cross protocol? Sorry.
So for example, if you are using same key for different protocol, it will be something wrong might be happen. But if you are using different key for single protocol, it usually doesn't matter. So my understanding is this document is saying about use different key for same protocol, and for example, and then using the same key for different protocol is outside the scope of this document, right?
Yeah, it's outside the scope.
Yeah, and by stating that, it might be easier for people to think about the security things. Security discussion should be much easier if you state that. Yeah, my point is something like that. Yeah.
So we often see in certificates the use of extended key usage to identify which protocols the key should be used with, and I would expect that would apply to these certificates as well.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Yuri.
I was going to say that in the current environment, I don't think a cross protocol attack is valid and applicable. The latest reference I see is a cross protocol attack against as a TLS dropping down to SSL version 2. I strongly doubt it would apply here. If I'm wrong, feel free to correct with the actual proposed attacks. I'd love to see them.
Go ahead, Mike.
An example of cross protocol, I don't know if this is correct or I don't know if this is good form, but I've seen certificates that have both the TLS and the Adobe PDF signing EKUs on them. And that's so right there, you've got a cross protocol. So I don't know what the theoretical or the literature is, but I think it does happen.
I'm not talking about certs using for more than one protocol. I'm talking about cross-protocol attacks. Yes, I sign PDF with the same key. I sign email. Fine. Do your best attacking it. Show me results.
Right. Yeah. I still think it's sort of useful to do, though, what they call composition analysis, just to sort of, might as well convince ourselves that it's safe to combine arbitrarily if we can. Whether there's actual practical attacks that come if you don't have that security analysis. Fair question.
I see the queue is empty. So I think unless somebody joins quickly, we're ready for the next topic. All right. Thanks, Rebecca. So I'm pleased that we got through all of this in 2 hours. Sorry for the stumbling at the beginning with the slide uploading. I'm pleased that we got through all of this, and I am really pleased to see that we've identified some topics to take to the list. I think that will set the direction for the group. Is there any other wrap-up? And thank you, Jonathan, for taking notes. You did a great job. Okay, hearing none, I think we're done. We finished a few minutes early. Thank you all for your participation.
Wow.
And we'll talk again at IETF 114. Hopefully some of us will be in Philadelphia. All right, thank you.
Have a great one.
Bye-bye.
Bye.